Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Wayfarer podcast. I'm Katya Guzman, and we got,
Jonathan.
and then we got,
Zach.
and then,
Jared.
and right in the back.
Riley.
Alrighty, we got everyone together. Super psyched to get into it today. Together with everyone around, we are again recovering an old way of seeing the Christian life. That as wayfarers, we are walking together, never alone. Our little
Walk
we gotta
on.
walk.
See,
We gotta
walk
do the
on.
cheers first.
Walk
Ready?
on.
Never alone.
Walk
on.
on. See, that was so good.
See, that worked out really well. There we go. So to go over what we've been doing, we've been shifting perspectives, we've been slowing down, we've been walking together. And today we are learning how to embody that faith. And it's kind of tough nowadays, right? Like, we got temptations in every corner. We have social media, we have TikTok, we have just things that are always trying to get into our hearts and minds. So trying to actually live out what we're talking about is pretty tough. But I have to say, right now on episode 4, I feel like I've learned quite a lot about embodying the faith, and mainly because I'm kind of inspired by you guys. Like, I feel like when I bring up a conversation or a question, you guys are always encouraging me to live my best version of my life. And so I have to thank you guys first. And I think that's all about the wayfaring life, right? You have friends who are always encouraging you to do the best thing. And I think specifically for me thus far, I think relationships have really been affected in that embodiment, just because, like I said, temptations, for me specifically, I'd say like romantic relationships, if we're going to get deep into that. Like, guys, I know.
Tone change was deep.
Is that allowed?
We're getting crazy. But seriously, like I said, temptations, like you'll scroll on Instagram and you see couples everywhere. And as a single Christian girl, we could assume I would like to, get married to a nice Christian guy, have the whole 9 yards. But like, there's so much temptation to just go, and hookup culture is a thing, and all the other things with, I don't know, relationships I go on. But I have to say that by continuing to walk in this just slow journey of really just taking in the nutrients and letting it digest and taking it in, I feel that I've been given a gift of a little bit more patience in filling. I'm going to quote Jonathan right now. He said at one point, the void is filled with anything but Jesus, you have to expect that it's going to disappoint you. And I thought that was so profound, because it's so true. Like, even if you fill it with maybe your favorite influencer you follow on Instagram, they'll even mess up. Or if you fill it with your best friend, they might say something to you one day and you're going to be like, oh gosh, that kind of hurt. Like, if it's not Jesus, it's not going to, uplift you all the time. And that's okay. And so again, with like dating and with just relationships in general, it's taught me to be a little bit more intentional and a little bit more patient, and understand that whatever God has in plan for me has already been planned, and all I have to do is continue walking in it, and then it'll happen eventually. And so I think that's been one of my biggest lessons lately. But I don't know. How about you, Jonathan? What do you got on your mind?
Yeah, that idea of embodiment was it goes back to that void, and it was a frustration that I had in my faith. Growing up, the idea of faith was, okay, believe in Jesus and you're saved, and that's true, and that is I don't want to discount that. Like, that is what your salvation is based on. It's not what you can do or not do or accomplish or not. Your salvation is given to you by faith. And in my mind, once I got that, I was like, okay, I'm good now. I can do whatever because I'm saved. But there's that void that was still not filled. That was like an existential dread. And I remember being frustrated because I thought I was doing all the right things, but there was still a lack of fulfillment and satisfaction. And I remember meeting you, Zach, and noticing that you seemed to have it, whatever that fulfillment was. And I didn't have the terms like embodiment before, but the concept of your faith going from this abstract idea of, okay, I'm in relationship with this higher being, but like I don't really know what that means, so I'll try to be a good person and then good things will happen. But it was much more than that. It became a way. Like that's why we say we're wayfarers, because there was a way to go about life that wasn't something you just accomplished and something that you got. It was something, I kind of picture it like you remember what is it, y equals mx plus b, like a line graph. It's a consistent line that just goes on forever. It's a straight line. It goes on to infinity. And that's kind of how I see it. It's just like this straight line, and it's that thing that you can hold on to, and you're going to go all over the place with it. But if you turn back to that and you calibrate yourself with that way, the fulfillment seems to come from that. And you always say that, I think you say embodiment takes like 3 years to really embody something. And that's something I've found to be true. I've probably been in it for around 3 years now since I met you. And it has brought that fulfillment that I've been looking for.
Yeah.
The way.
I love it. That's literally, I mean, you pretty much just dove into that one piece of like, don't let other things fill the void other than Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
No, I love it. You really do embody it too.
And
So
I've tried other things and they always lead to disappointment.
I love it. No, I have that in my notes app, and I actually refer to it quite often. So thank you,
I'm
Jonathan.
honored.
And how about you, Jared? What's popping in your mind with embodiment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like such a process. Like I remember growing up like a Christian, like you just kind of want to like get things and then be past it. And it's like, that's why it's, when we talk about what you're saying, like a way of living, like a line to walk down, is that, you know, you're not going to walk that perfectly, and you're not going to be able to do it 100% right all the time. And I think that like that freedom of that, of like, man, it's a process that's going to take, 3 years to really start embodying it well. And then I think the rest of your lifetime to like get it, potentially perfectly, but probably never exactly that. And I think, not having that scorecard, I think, is like huge. Because I mean, it used to be very easy to, question or really get down on myself if you're judging yourself so harshly if you mess up or if you stray off the path a little bit. But, I think there's kind of like you would do with a friend, is like, it's a loving pat to come with me and come along the journey, that it's not a judgment or, a courtroom that's, getting the gavel out on you if you mess up, but it's a, hey, come with me. And it's like, you messed up, like, let me help you up and let's keep walking. And I think it's such a radically different way of thinking about it. Cause it's like, if I didn't read my Bible today, it's not like, oh no, it's over. I'm screwed. I'm going to hell. It's a process. And I think like part of that is like living out of that identity makes me want to get in my Bible. It's not oh, I need to check the box, but it's like, man, this is what fuels my day and like helps me be centered and proper.
Totally. It's not like you're forcing it. It's not like a routine almost. It's a desire. Like, this brings me peace. This brings me like meditation. So I love that. That's great. And even with like your friends, like, was there something like specific that was coming into your mind when you were saying that? Like how people are just that embodiment of what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think about times where my faith has like grown a lot, and it's always been in community. When you're sharing, the struggles, and it's not that you're hitting on it perfectly, but it's like, I can just think of a time where it's like, man, just constantly being open and like wanting to like lovingly, like, I mean, iron sharpens iron, it's like in the Bible. And I think like so much of that is true, that, in this journey, it's like, it can get, if you try to do it on your own, like, it's very difficult to do that. And I think in the Bible, we're really made for community, and like we're made to be in the church for a purpose. I think that there's a reason behind that, because it's a lot easier when you're walking with people rather than, trying to get your bootstraps up and get after it.
Totally. No, it just feels good, right? How about you, Riley?
Yeah, I think I relate to you, Jared, in that sense of like a little bit of like what it felt like in, growing up in the church, kind of that idea of like embodiment wasn't really a thing, like you went to church and you checked the box and, you wanted to learn that thing so you can move on to the next. It was like like growing up in the church, for me, it felt like I was just like jumping thing to thing, similar to what I feel like you were saying. And then that idea of embodiment, that idea of, you know, just the long, slow, deep posture that, you know, that Zach, you know, encourages all of us to learn and go through life with. Those things are like things I'd never heard before until V3, until I met you, Zach, until I was a part of the team and the ministry and just growing in, you know, my walk here. And then we're going to keep talking so much more about this idea of embodiment, but it's really is something that I feel like you don't see anywhere else. People may have that sense of embodiment and things, but specifically in the church world, you don't hear that term embodiment, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like the language can be different. Like, I feel like my church, you know, did a great job when I was growing up, like teaching me the gospel, teaching me how to try to live, you know, but I think also there's just a reality of like my own maturity, you know. Middle school Jared wasn't ready to take on embodiment, you know, like he didn't, couldn't really wrap my head around.
I would agree with that too.
You know?
Like, I feel like my church growing up was very good about trying to encourage everybody to make disciples, you know, share the gospel, make disciples. Even, you know, being a part of a ministry on school campus called First Priority, you know, great ministry that's on middle school and high school campuses, and their goals to share the gospel with their campus. And so I feel like I had a good sense of like, all right, I'm supposed to share the gospel. I'm supposed to help, you know, make disciples of, go and make disciples of all nations. But that idea of embodiment, like, all right, so I'm supposed to go make disciples, but how do you do that? How long, like, what do you need to do that? You know, those things, like, they would try to give you the tools. And like you said, I feel like the language was something that was missing. The language of embodiment, the idea of long, slow, deep, those things, like, there's a lot of tools and language that I feel like, V3 does great at with that and helps fill in some of those gaps. And so embodiment's one of those, long, slow, deep is one of those. And I think we're going to keep getting more into it.
And I think a key piece of that is something that we spent a lot of time marinating in is just opening your eyes to, if this is true, then this is the reality that we're living in. And what does that mean? Like, to go through your day to day knowing that every person you're talking to is an immortal being. There's a soul behind that body, and to see them like that and to know there is a God. What does that mean when I'm interacting with my coworkers or interacting with my friends, to just have that perspective? And it takes so much repetition of the same simple things over and over to be able to live through that lens.
I think it's very easy to look at your faith like a Costco membership, where it's like you go on Sundays and it's like none of the rest of the day. But, you know, I think that's where it's so, you know, if it's true, like you're saying, then like it changes everything. You know, that's where around Easter, I always like to share, I think it's a C.S. Lewis quote where he's just like, this is either the most important thing in the world or it literally is pointless and like not worth really even considering. And it's like, wow. Because it's like, that's what it demands. It demands that kind of response. You either have to think it's useless or you have to understand that, oh, the God of the universe came down, you know, and we're in the Christmas season. It's like he was born in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem. It's a progress. You know?
It's long, it's slow, and it's deep. It takes time to build that.
Embodiment takes a while. Okay. Listen, I've only been in the church since I was a child, so how would I know it was Bethlehem?
That's great. That's good. Well, I mean, how about you, Zach? What are you learning as we are walking in this wayfaring walk?
Yeah. First is just fun, right? Like this is so wonderful to get to do this together. And you said at the beginning, like that shift in perspective. And you guys are all referencing it. Everything you're just describing it's so cool to think that I'm sure people who are watching are going, yeah, that's similar to my experience. Or, oh yeah, I had something like that happen in my experience with the church. And that's because we're coming out of an entire kind of epoch in time in Western culture that has been very disembodied, and the Christian faith has been thought of in terms of ideas or presuppositions or beliefs that you check off on that. And that's not a critique against any particular church. It's just the Enlightenment saturated culture that we live in approached faith that way. And I think a lot of people are, you use the word recovering, kind of thinking, no, this is either so significant, it's only true if it's true. Like if Jesus is who he said he is, and he's literally making an invitation for us to follow him, then discipleship becomes about a relationship of following this one who was born and who lived and who died and who rose and who invites us. Okay, right? And I think everybody's kind of in this same moment, and we talk about post-Christian, post-secular. So if you're listening, you're like, yes, right? Yes, we're all kind of in the same space. And that's what's so cool about this moment is we're all going, okay, yeah, Lewis quote, again, if I find within myself desires that can't be met in this world, that void, then the only possible explanation is that I was made for another world. And when I was wrestling with that idea, I said, it's not just another world, it's for another. It's relational. I was made for the one who, Colossians says this, we were made by him and for him. And so that longing, Augustine, we're restless till we find our rest in thee. So I guess what I'm learning is just like how much this is resonating with so many people, this conversation. And there's an opportunity for us to really explore this together and not do it alone and not be rushed to think like, oh, we got to figure it out today. No, this is recovering an older way of thinking. This isn't new. This is there's a scripture that says, return to the old ways, the ancient past, and there you'll find rest for your soul. Stand at this crossroad, and look and find that good way. And I think that I'm just learning that there's so many people who are really excited to ask these questions and explore what is an embodied faith like? And that's discipleship in that framework. And when it becomes that, it's both like an easy yoke and it's like a light burden. And yet it's this exhilarating invitation to radical transformation that does cost us something. And so there's this beautiful tension there. So I'm loving it. And you mentioned it's Christmas. I mean, we're literally in the Christmas season. And I think that's what I get so excited every year to celebrate this. Lewis again said it's the grandest miracle. The idea that God would take on flesh is just an affirmation and of our human dignity. This is what Jonathan was talking about. There's no mere mortals. Like there's a meaning to our existence. The fact that we have bodies and that we live embodied lives. The Christian faith isn't about escaping our bodies and getting out of this thing. It's actually the radical story that God got into this thing. So we'll pull on that thread, but it is Christmas, and this is a Christmas episode by Jared's shirt. You can tell, slaying it, right? So before we go deep into that conversation, does it feel like it? I mean, I when you said it's Christmas episode, I'm literally looking at a tree, and I was like, is it really Christmas? Jonathan? Does it feel like it this year?
It does. I don't have any like Christmas decorations or anything up, but someone hung up lights at my office, which is really nice. And we all work in the dark for some reason, just because I think it's for our eyes. But my team, we all turn all the lights off, and we just like are glowing. But there's these lovely Christmas lights across the top of the office, and it feels like there's just the whole world is now sort of acknowledging this event, whether they realize it or not. And there's a joy that comes with it. So it does feel like Christmas.
Yeah, it's cool. Christmas, we were talking about it earlier, that it is that moment where the entire world seems to slow still in harmony. There's still that one last little bit of ground that it seems like everybody somehow orients toward. It's really, really cool. Favorite Christmas memory as a kid?
Wow. Probably. So my family always goes to a Christmas tree farm every year in Raleigh. We'd go. It's in Cary. It's like 40 minutes away, and it's a giant farm with Christmas trees, and we always would get one. There's one particular time where it snowed, and it was like my whole family was there, like my grandma was there, and it was just like a really special day. And it was like freshman year high school, Jared. I was wearing like my Broughton football sweatshirt with my number on it. It felt super cool.
They're so cool.
Dude, go back to those days.
Back up on the freshman team. I was.
Can we get some pictures of that?
There is pictures on Facebook, of course. It always become my new profile pic, because it's looking good. So those were always really great memories. We'd watch Charlie Brown in the car on the way out there. We'd pretty much have to buy it every year because iTunes didn't really have their stuff together, and my dad had a bunch of different accounts. So every year is like, how are we going to watch Charlie Brown? And then we'd get Chick-fil-A on the way back. So
okay,
So nice.
everybody in my demographic was just like, wait a second. He was just referencing childhood, driving and watching movies in the car. And you made 7 different references that didn't exist when I went to country Christmas trees down.
I know in the 1960s they didn't have that, Zach. It
Watch
was real
out.
It's
tough.
a
We'll
good
get
thing we're
back
trying
to-
to reach a younger
Oh, my
audience.
goodness, yeah. Why am I here? You did such a better job in the opening, and I was just marveling at your wisdom. All of you
Oh
guys
my
talking, I
gosh.
was like, good. My work here is done. I like
Hey,
it.
Start
get out of
V5
here.
for you.
Training wheels off.
Let's go.
Oh, no.
Hey, I like it. This is good. Christmas as a kid for you. What was childhood like in your home?
Childhood at Christmas was always so much fun. I mean, I just had a really good upbringing in that way. I mean, every morning, like when Santa would come, we'd all wake up at like 4 a.m. and run down. And my parents were like, Santa needs 5 more minutes or something like that. He has some other stuff. I don't know. Like it would be something like that. And then we'd wait till like 6 a.m. But we'd open the presents and then we'd always open all the doors because it's kind of colder in Florida.
6 a.m.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
as kids, like it was me and my 5 siblings. Like we were all psyched and, like we'd want to open our presents. So that was that. And then we'd just cook breakfast, all just hang out and marvel over our new toys. And then after that, you go to my grandparents' house and we'd open grandparents' presents and then hang out there. But I have to say, Christmas Eve has always been my favorite personally to this day since I was a child. Because my whole neighborhood has this like thing where they'll put Christmas lights on their Jeeps and everyone just goes in like a parade of Jeeps and everyone's just out and like community is strong. I mean, talk about like wayfaring. I mean, I don't know if everyone in my neighborhood's Christian, but like there's something about like just goodness that everyone just connects on. And we all just felt the vibes. And to this day, we feel the vibes. I mean, if y'all are ever in the area, pop by my neighborhood. It's a good time. And everyone just shares stories and, sits by fire and has a nice, what is it called? What is it? The Christmas drink? Eggnog.
Nutmeg?
Nutmeg.
That works too.
Yeah.
Wassail.
That
How many
one.
Jeeps were in your neighborhood to have a
Right.
whole parade for it?
There's a lot of Jeeps. They like hide them. I don't know. Like every year, like 20.
Got that too. They hide them.
Yeah, I think so. And then like now golf carts have been added into the mix. So
What a
That's a thing.
downgrade.
I don't know. My
What a
kids
fall
don't
off.
think
Some
so.
of these golf carts are more expensive than Jeeps these days.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a thing. Here's my question. We're going to do a poll. I wish we had a way to do a live poll and see Christmas Eve or Christmas morning. I'm hands down Christmas Eve. I love
We'll throw a poll in the chat
Most-
on
okay.
on the YouTube. There'll be a poll in the chat. for
Let's
it.
go.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Like
Start
the-
now. Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, Riley? What do you think?
Christmas Eve
Come on.
all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The I mean, me and my family. I mean, my family and I. We just have like so many little traditions. I mean, all my extended family and everybody comes over on Christmas Eve, and we all do some sort of Christmas Eve menu. Anything from chili to we've done Christmas taco bar before, and then we all bring a white elephant gift, and we do a white elephant gift exchange, and we have like this whole list of rules, and you roll a dice, and whatever number it lands on, it could go for an hour or two. Sometimes it could go for 20 minutes, but it's just so fun. And then my dad sometimes doesn't get off till really late on Christmas Eve because he works nights, and sometimes if he gets off really late, even now if he gets off early, we usually end up at Waffle House at like
Aw.
11 or midnight. And so that just midnight Waffle House at Christmas Eve and going into Christmas morning, it's a little bit of a tradition we started a couple years ago. And so Christmas Eve is my favorite for sure.
It's so good. I think it is like when you walk out, whether you're at Waffle House or you're just at your neighborhood or at church or wherever you're at, when you walk out in the street like 11:30 on Christmas Eve, nothing like it. If it's snowing, it even helps more. But even in Florida, Like
Yeah.
there's a quietness to that moment that
Balmy
is
75 degrees.
and it's still quiet. Yeah. Don't
Hopefully
I'm-
not this year.
I'm gonna tear up. Everybody who's watching in Oregon, just know I want like a prisoner of war sign where I'm just like, "Help, get me to the snow."
You voluntarily
Like,
came here,
I
Zach.
know, but I want the snow. Do you have? You said no decorations. Do you have a tree?
No, I don't even have a couch. Like, I,
Is that
literally a-
Christmas decoration?
it's
No
a
Christmas
camping
couch?
chair. I have very minimal, so no.
There was
but,
a tree down the street from us the other day, like alive and everything. I almost grabbed it and put it in the
What do you
yard.
mean?
It was, it was planted.
Well, usually, no, like a Christmas tree, a Christmas tree.
We cut it down.
Someone had an extra Christmas tree, I guess, this year, and they put it out. And
Like at the dumpster?
no, like just on, like in front of their house on the street, like for someone to grab.
Worked at UPS and for one Christmas season, and on December 27th, I delivered a Christmas tree one time.
Oh,
And I
That's
was like,
so
man, I was like,
fun.
somebody got in trouble.
Somebody is not happy.
Somebody did not get it on
Oh.
time.
So no
That's a good
tree.
point.
No, but after Christmas is over, I go around and throw all the trees
Mm.
in my van and then do a bonfire. So
Yeah.
In the van.
There you go. That's epic.
The van still works somehow.
somehow,
Okay, we're gonna get you a tree. We'll start a poll, and then we're gonna get you a tree. That may,
Tree.
yeah, all right.
I feel like it's a job for my wife someday.
You're saving
Yeah,
a tree.
decorations
I
and
think that's
trees
pretty.
and-
That there you
Yeah.
go.
Zach, what
Wow.
was Christmas like in the 1900s?
The 1960s. It wasn't that bad. I was.
19.
I'm gonna just 1977 was the year of our Lord. 77 was when I was born. So I was born in the 70s. That's way
Wow.
back. Yeah. Can you believe that?
Jared was-
These
Did
two-
they
Close,
have
right?
photos?
You weren't even an imagination in the 70s. I don't
I
think.
don't think my grandparents were
Yeah.
born then.
Wow. Here's the deal. Christmas in the 1900s, as my kids would say, they'd be like, "Dad, you were born in the 1900s." I'm like, "I know, that's
That's
a long time
crazy.
ago." But it was awesome. It was like Christmas Eve was hands down favorite moment, and our house got super quiet because there was no electricity, nothing like that. So it was just just
Wait, what?
just
I know for a second I was like,
Candles.
wait.
We had to go to bed real
No,
early.
it was
Something wasn't taught right in history.
4:30. Yeah, it was the westward expand. It took a while to get electricity out west.
Oregon Trail.
You Floridians had it early. No, Christmas Eve would be like go to church, gets quiet. We would open one present on Christmas Eve. It was like tradition. And my dad has this beautiful record. There's a folk singer named Roger Whittaker, and he has this album. And there's a song on there called "The Governor's Dream." And this song is Roger Whittaker, Governor's Dream. Listen to this song. It's this beautiful tale of a king who's born, whose kingdom would surpass the Roman Empire. And the way it's told in song is just really beautiful. So we would play that record every year. And my dad would put this record on, and you had that sound of a record kind of spinning and the crackle and all that. And there's usually a fire going. I mean, all the things, right? And we would listen to that. And I was enchanted by that story of a kingdom beyond Rome, right? And the birth of this king shook even the powers of government. And it was just something really beautiful as a kid about that story. And so that was Christmas Eve in the 1900s. Record player, fireplace, listening to records with the family. But I think that stuck, right? Like that's why traditions are so good, whether you wait to get a tree till you're married or whatever. These traditions, these
Might be a while.
yeah.
at this rate.
Those traditions are so good. Stuff like that sticks, and I think that's the embodiment piece, the incarnation piece, the fact that Jesus was literally born in history, and that there was mystery to his birth. Mary, saying, "How can this be? Like, I don't understand. The life of God is going to be placed within me, and out of me is going to come this King of Kings that was promised." Like that beautiful story taking place, as Lewis said, it is the grandest miracle. Everything hinges on that. Actually, that God entered the story, and as he would say, wrote himself into the script. It's amazing, and it transforms and brings dignity to our embodied lives. And I think I'll pull us back to this conversation about embodiment, because I think that's what's so wonderful when you're sitting around with family or friends or breaking bread or opening presents. We were talking about it earlier. Does that mean anything? is it meaningful? Does it matter? And the incarnation is this incredible yes from God that life matters. Like, it's beautiful that you lived, right? We just posted that. There's this wonderful poem that has that theme to it. But that idea that our lives actually do, our embodied lives, there's a dignity to us. And you mentioned that mere mortals, Jonathan. That the weight of glory is the sermon that came from C.S. Lewis. And he literally says there are no mere mortals. You've never met one. The person sitting next to you is a being, is a creature that if you saw who they really were, you'd be tempted to worship them. That's a different way of seeing people that the line is right back to the incarnation, that God did not push himself away from his creation or from creation, but entered into it. And there's a dignity there. With that idea of there's no mere mortals, had you heard that? Like, when was the first time you heard, maybe it's tonight in that conversation, but had you heard that before from Lewis? And if so, how did that impact you, hearing that there's no mere mortals? You've never met one.
I think that the way you're saying it is the first time I've heard it tonight. I mean, like, mere mortals, like, if you saw their actual being, you'd want to worship them. I've never thought about it like that, but I have had my own thoughts of like we really do live forever. I mean, in our Christian faith, that is what we believe. And I mean, it kind of blows my mind. And I remember when I was little, I used to sit in the car and think about like an eternal, just like blackness, and it would terrify me. But then like when I really grasped my faith, I now am like, it's not like that. But I don't know, my human brain cannot grasp what that even looks like. But like the way that you guys are saying it is that like we already are. It's a concept that I could probably go in a rabbit hole with. It can go in so many different directions, but yeah, I don't it blows my mind.
Yeah.
In essence. Jared, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so counterculture, because I think it's easy to just like write people off and just be like, oh, that person's an idiot, and not really consider, who they are like as a being. And I think it's, that's where, so much of Christianity is like everybody has like an inherent worth and value that I think is, at this point, very countercultural. Like how we view people and how we respect other people, I think is very different. And so thinking through the idea of people not being mere mortals, and that they, there's a soul there that's going to live forever, I think is insane to think about, and makes you want to interact with everybody differently. Even the people that piss you off sometimes.
Yeah.
You can say that. They're going to beep that out.
Grinches. Riley will fix it.
Yeah. I don't know. That's
Made
such
me
a good
upset.
point. It like really does like
Trigger warning.
if you think about it like that, like holding grudges, like even in my own life, I feel like I don't hold many grudges, but like there's people who make you, tick a little bit. And I mean, I don't know. Thinking about it like that, like they are going to live forever. Like even as much as they might make you feel a certain way, like I don't know. But then it's like you think about those people too, and sometimes they aren't living a way that is dignifying their own body. And so that's what makes you think these things. And I don't know if I'm making sense right now.
This is, I think, the invitation to kind of, it's a lifelong journey to consider this. I just was reading a piece from a friend of mine, Mike Metzger, who put this up, and it was, he was referencing Dallas Willard's thinking on this, but Dallas Willard put this idea out there that like who goes to heaven, and Dallas Willard was tongue in cheek saying like whoever is ready for it, right? And you go, what do you mean? Well, if you could imagine embodying perfect love, like a life where there was no grudge holding and where you didn't see that person through those eyes, like if all that was removed, and would you want that? Would you even be ready for that? Right? And that's that wayfaring process that you were talking about, is just little by little, this idea that love matures in our lives and in our embodied lives, and it's transformative. And I think Paul's thinking on this. When I was a child, I thought like a child, and I had these ideas of what it was to follow Jesus. But then as I start to know him, I realize what's actually happened. The life of God's been birthed in me. Okay, right? And that life is going to continue forever. And even after this physical body dies, it doesn't disappear. Like the promise of Christianity is that our embodied life is resurrected. And that, again, you talk about incarnation and resurrection, both affirmations of the embodied life. Like this life of God doesn't choose to live in temples or in these holy shrines or in some, outer space. Like the life of God birthed in your body is a temple, and you'll be resurrected. And the life of God is we are a part of this incredible life that God has given us, and it extends beyond the grave. That is such an affirmation to the human life. I think right now transhumanism is kind of the conversation. Everybody's like, what's next, right? Like we've evolved. We're pretty good. We know how to, do a lot of stuff and work in the dark and have like we can do a lot of stuff.
That baffles me.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
And the question is, what's next? And I think what I want to propose and pull on the thread tonight is like, what is it to be human? Like, what if the question is not what's next? Like again, the Christian faith isn't trying to get out of the body. It's trying to get the life of God embodied, right? Like that's not something we're going to make true. He makes that true, but there's an invitation to walk and to participate in that. And so Lewis, I want to pull on this thread. Lewis has some thinking in Abolition of Man. You were a part of a group that we just read, The Abolition of Man. And he talks about this idea of human beings are rational beings. So we've got minds. We've got sensual beings. So we've got desires and sensual tastes and the flesh part of us. And then we have a spiritual center. And that spiritual center is what governs that rational mind and the sensual mind. When you think about our culture, in our cultural moment, rational, sensual, spiritual, those three parts, would you say in our moment now that the most of the people that is it more a rational culture that you're around, a sensual culture that you're around, a spiritual culture? Are you around people who harmonize those things in a really beautiful way? What do you experience just with the people that you know?
I think it's a lot of the sensual, just chasing feelings and chasing desires, and it goes back to just feeling things that make you feel good and wanting to go after those, and at the same time very rational, like a scientific, we can't prove there's God, we for all we know this is all meaningless and pointless. And when you have those two ideas where if everything is pointless and everything came from nothing and it's a materialistic world, but I have these feelings that want to be filled, then it's a dangerous combination, because then you lose that balance and that control, and then you think you're free if you can do whatever you want, but you become a slave to your own desires, and it's not fun.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it ties back to what I was saying at the beginning with how the wayfaring life is helping me with relationships, just because I think it's the age that we're in. Like, we are very much in that, like, finding, and with that we listen to our desires, and I mean the desires go in so many different directions of a lot, but I would definitely say the sensual aspect is everywhere, in the movies that are directed towards our age group, TV series, books, even just like desires of our own. Like, it's normal, and I think that's like something to talk about, but how to go about it is the question without suppressing the natural human need. Right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things where it's like, I think it's easy to, I mean, inside the Christian worldview, I think it's, we see this one way, but if you're not a Christian, I think it makes a ton of sense that you would want to lean on the sensual to try to, medicate, try to feel better, because there's such an emptiness in life that I think is one of the things that I think is a compelling argument of what makes us human, is the fact that we have this like deep longing and desire that seemingly everybody, you talk to people who have a ton of money and they still feel empty. You talk to people who have a ton of success and they still, it's lonely at the top. And it's like all these different things that people will try to lean on to fulfill them, and they still feel that emptiness. It's almost like in each of those areas, people are drinking salt water, trying to fulfill themselves.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times it continues a lot of that thirst. And even, pivoting to the Christian worldview, I think it's interesting how, there's, satisfaction and, fullness that we can feel in Christianity. But Zach, do you think that comes across like all the time? Or do you think there's like days where you're going to really feel that fulfillment, and then days where you're not necessarily going to have that maybe feeling, but you have to like just lean on the truth that that it's there? Because I feel like that's such a balance where, like, Paul says he's learned to be content in all things, but like, does that mean that Paul 24/7 all the time was like, I'm content? Like, shipwreck, who cares?
Yeah, let's go. Let's wreck our ship.
Yeah,
I'll show you my contentment. I think it's great. Like, I've learned the secret of being content in all things. Different than I've learned the secret of being happy in all things or being optimistic in all things. Like, no, there's going to be deep pain. Paul knew deep pain and deep struggle and deep strife and fear, all that, right? But I've learned the secret in being content, even in the midst of that. That's the invitation. And I think that that's part of what is so helpful to say, we were made with feelings, and you're going to feel it. You're like Jesus wept, and there was deep grief at death and a deep no to injustice. And those things are, Dr. Amy Orr Ewing, who we just are doing this Advent devotional with, we just got to talk to her on our other podcast, and she was given the opportunity to make a case for Christianity to the ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenry, Jordan Peterson. All these really brilliant people are coming together and asking these questions of like, what does it mean to be human? And so she was invited to give the case for Christianity. Like, is the Christian faith reliable, and does it have something to say about being human? And she chose to take this line of saying that it's moral outrage, that feeling of injustice, that actually says there's something that is true about the way you feel, and we don't have to deny that. Like, there's something to make sense of there, but we don't deny it. So I think that for sure in the Christian life, you're going to have days where you are deeply brokenhearted by things. You're deeply saddened by things. There's going to be moments of euphoric joy. I think there's going to be moments of deep, almost just like sadness that you can't make sense of, because there's a longing that can't be fulfilled. We're going to experience the spectrum of those things. I think part of what the invitation of the Christian faith gives us is it's a yes, right? Like the affirmation of our humanity and that we can feel. And the question is then, where do those feelings go, right? How do you make sense of them? Do you have to deny them? Do you have to say, I shouldn't feel those things? Do I have any objective reason to feel what I'm feeling? I think those are all the questions that then get really exciting when you think about how the Christian faith answers and helps you then make sense of that feeling and what to do with it. Do I indulge it? Do I reject it? Do I sit with it? And there's a way forward. So I don't know. That's a long way to answer, but I would say not happy all the time, for sure.
Well, I think that's what the key, and I'm sure other people have felt this, but like, I feel like at times I've been very much a slave to my emotions. So however I wake up that day, that's how I'm going to feel that rest of the day. And I think, and part of that, there's a living in an embodied way is not necessarily trying to reject that. Like, if you're sad, being like, well, I can't be sad. God says to be joyful, so I need to be joyful. But it's like learning how to walk in all those stages of emotions that you're going to feel in I think the spectrum of emotions, it's like learning how to walk in an embodied way through all of those is like key. And knowing that not every day is going to be, sunshine and rainbows. I wish it was, but it's just like not the reality, And I think that is very much the case when you look in the outside of Christianity perspective, is that people have all those emotions and they don't know what to do with them, and they don't know how to process them. They don't know, what it means for their life that they wake up sad one day and like things are hard. And I think that's, not having an answer to those can be such a lonely expression. And at times where I've tried to, look outside of Christianity, it's like you get there and you're like, well, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot here, to explore. And so I think that's where, that embodiment is so key to, answers around, the full spectrum of life.
Yeah, I would say specifically you were tapping into sadness. And I think that's something that I've been reflecting on a lot lately, because there is, like, as much as you have a great joy and you just feel like you're on top of the world, you feel the deep frustration or the deep sadness. And it was raining or something like that, and I was just looking at the rain, and it looked like such a sad scene in the gloominess of how everything was and just the mistiness, and it just looked sad. But at the same time, with the sadness, there's like a peace that comes with it. And just looking at the rain and how it just falls and it just is, and it just allows itself to just be. And I feel like the same way can be reflected towards us in that sadness, and keeping in mind, like, we are sitting with God and you have that like protection almost. You can just sit in the sadness and feel it and understand that there is an underlying peace in that, and showing you there is like a beauty about it. There's a lesson behind it.
Yeah.
There's
like
more.
a gift to feeling the emotions. Like, even though the emotions feel sad, like it's a gift that we get to feel those emotions and go through them and then overcome those emotions. I feel like being sad, you know, in the moment of being sad, it's hard to, you know, look, you know, past the sadness and try to, you know, even move on from that, or try to fill that sadness with something. You know, I feel like we talked about sensual. I feel like that's what a lot of people, like, in today's culture do. They feel sad and they try to fill it with something. And I feel like that embodiment, if you have that embodiment and you just are able to sit there, reflect in those emotions, go through these emotions, feel those emotions. Like, no one's telling you shouldn't feel sad when you feel sad. Usually if you're feeling sad, it's because those feelings are being justified by something that happened. And so don't feel that sadness and just like be like, oh, I can't feel sad. Like you said, Jared, I can't feel sad because, you know, I'm supposed to be joyful. It's like, no, feel sad, go through these emotions, and then look on the outside of those emotions, look past those emotions after you've gone through them, and see the joy, see what good is going to come from those emotions through, you know, the learning from whatever was sad. You know, I feel like there's always something to grow from.
It's crazy to think like those emotions and feeling those things. It's such a powerful affirmation of the dignity of our humanity, right? That the Saint Irenaeus said, the glory of God is man fully alive, fully feeling that sadness. So somebody listening to this episode, probably this is going to come out right before Christmas, and here we are, and you're listening to this driving to, I remember one of the first fatal accidents that I ever went to when I was working in forensics in my first early job. I went to a fatal crash that happened I think it was on Christmas Eve, and we got to this accident scene where there was a fatality, and there were Christmas presents in the car. And I was just like, man, somebody was on their way to like joy. And now somebody's family's getting a notification that the person that they love is not going to be with them. Not just not then, but not ever. And you think about that. Somebody listening to this episode probably lost someone in the last 12 months, 24 months that they deeply love. And you go, okay, how does that square with the glory of God as man fully alive? And I would say the glory of God is that person sitting there weeping at death, because Cornelius Plantinga says this. He wrote a book about sin, and he said, it's not the way it's supposed to be. And so the glory of God is somebody missing somebody really deeply at Christmas and crying about it and saying, I'm sad, and I feel that sadness. And feeling that sadness there's actually dignity in that. It matters. You're not a nothing. You're not an accident. And it doesn't not hurt to have somebody you love die or not be present, right? Like, that's the incarnation. It gives me chills to even talk about it, because it's like, no, that's the thing. God entered into this story. He's created us with this capacity to feel that. And when we see death, or we see pain or injustice, we recoil and we're like, that's not the way it's supposed to be. And so it moves me to tears, or it sits with sadness. And the glory of God is man not saying no to that, but saying like, no, yeah, that I can feel that. And I don't mourn without hope. There is something that overcomes and has entered in. So light even has come into that moment, but it doesn't change it. So that's what I hear in this conversation. Is just like, there's people who are all of us experiencing that full range, that full spectrum of emotion. And this episode, we wanted to just say, hey, wayfaring life, right? It's a shift in perspective. We just see things, we can see things differently. Second, it's long, slow, deep. Like it's going to take reps before I can sit with my tears and have this really commingled reality of my sadness and my joy are kind of both commingled. I can mourn, but with hope. That's the long, slow, deep to kind of move into that. So it's a shift in perspective. It's a shift in pace. It's longer, it's slower, it's deeper. We don't do it alone. I get to sit with people and say, I feel super sad this year. And I have people who go, yeah, I know what that feels like, and I can meet you there. And then this reality that we're talking about tonight, that we do that in our bodies, that we're not nothing. And that the birth of Christ, like the incarnation, him coming in. And I'll read something to close this episode in a second that Lewis writes on miracles, that just like he came down to lift us up. And it's just beautiful. We'll end the episode with that. But before we get off of that, the rational, the sensual, and the spiritual center. That was Lewis's thinking on what is it, if we had to define these capacities as humans, right? We're rational, we're sensual, and we have this spiritual center. And those things are to be harmonized. It's that governing spiritual life that God has given us. That being fully lit up is what takes our rationality and it yokes it with our sensuality and it harmonizes it in a really symphonic way. That was when we think like that, that also is recovering a different way of thinking about the human person. I think growing up in the church sometime we heard like being a rational person is, yeah, that's a win, but being a sensual person is like, stay away from that. What were some of the messages that you all heard and experienced growing up in the church about the body? Was it like, be suspicious of the body? Was it like the body's beautiful? I'm just curious what you all kind of grew up. How did you make sense of the body growing up in and around the church?
I feel like the desires were like a snake that you had to cut the head off of. It's like all these things. So you're gonna have all these desires, but like don't let them go. Don't let them run crazy. Yeah. Chop off the head.
Yeah.
Have control over it.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it was. I think it's like there's different levels to it. Kind of what I was talking about earlier. It's like there's a level of maturity, as a young person, that it's like you need certain boundaries so that you don't hurt yourself, which I think can be a positive thing. So like I wouldn't be like, oh man, I got beaten over the head with it, but maybe some good instruction for a young guy not knowing what to do. But it's like overall, how are you teaching it? That might vary.
Yeah,
did best do that.
Yeah, that idea that are my feelings something to be governed and matured, or are they something to be suspicious of? And it's like, maybe not. Maybe they're God given, and something to be matured. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, it was similar where it felt like it was me versus myself. Like there was you're gonna want to do all these things and you have to fight them because that's the devil, and like you can't give in to them, and that is a battle that is impossible to win unless you have Christ on your side. That's saying there, it's not about saying no to everything that your body wants. I think you were the one that said like perfect abstinence is easier than like a balance. Perfect moderation. Yeah. And that really is an art form to know, I can enjoy a glass of wine, but I'm not going to be a drunk. It's like how balancing those things was not necessarily taught. It was yes or no. And that's a lot harder to do.
Yeah. And wine, cigarettes, all these things, these are the easy ones, right? Mm-hmm. That we can be like, oh yeah, but think about it. Like my desire to scroll endlessly and distract. Like, is it bad to look at family pictures? And no, that's not bad. And like everything, perfect abstinence is easier than perfect moderation. Like that's a difficulty. Mm-hmm. So how about you? Messaging around the body growing up.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it a little bit just because I feel like growing up, the aspect of like sensual body was never talked about. Like it was not talked about. Like we don't tap in there. I mean, but as for like, desires, we were always taught to like transform them into like go and do sports or go and volunteer. Like we always were told to transform our desire into something better. And I mean, that was just me growing up in Catholic school. That's what they've told us. And also, I mean, the body of Christ, obviously, that's a big concept growing up with the Eucharist and things like that. So we were always taught to respect the body because, you know, body of Christ. And I mean, like I said, we never really talked about it. It was always like, what's the word? It's like, ooh, what is that?
Taboo.
Taboo.
There you go.
You got it.
Boom.
It's always taboo.
On top of
Taboo.
Yeah.
How about you?
For me, I feel like it was more. I always felt like the leaders around me, the people I had in my life, always told me to guard my heart, and I think that was the most, like, some of the probably best wisdom you'll ever get. I mean, it's so simple but so hard. Like, guard your heart, and I feel like from young age to older, it just gets harder and harder, I feel like, to guard your heart. And so the body wasn't something that was ever really talked about in a bad or a good way. I feel like it could have been talked about better, I think, but it also was talked about for me in my life and growing up and youth group and stuff like that. It was talked about for sure. I don't think it was ever talked about enough in a good way, but it also was never talked about in a bad way. But I do always remember people always saying, guard your heart. And I feel like that was almost a sense of, okay, guard your body, guard, the way into the heart could be through the body, guard your heart, guard your body, your emotions even, don't, let those take control of your whole body. So,
yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of the things I was excited about thinking about when this episode would come out. And I was like, okay, it's Christmas. It's right before Christmas, the incarnation. Like, what are we even celebrating, right? When we think about that, what is this celebration of Christmas? And so there was a natural conversation to have about the incarnation. But as soon as you have an incarnation conversation, you're immediately talking about human dignity and what it is to be a human person. And I thought, what a great setup, because what's right behind Christmas? New Year's. We all make New Year's resolutions. We all say, hey, 2024 is going to be, right? Like this year, right? I'm going to read 100 books, The Rational. My mind is just going to get huge in 2024. I'm going to travel. I'm going to drink good wine and eat good food. And, these things, it's the sensual that's going to be 2024. And then there's some people who are like, neither, right? This is going to be a spiritual year, right? And I think the invitation I want to make is like, maybe 2024 is a yes to that. Maybe 2024 is the recovery of this being a human, being a person to the glory of God is man fully alive. What would it look like in 2024 to embrace that and say, no, there is a spiritual center, a life of God that's given to us, that's a gift. And he's created us with beautiful minds, rational minds that are able to think and we can act. We have wills, all of that. Yes. And we can experience pleasure. We can experience joy. We can experience sadness. And what would it look like to mature each of those parts of us and then to see them harmonized and to see a greater and greater degree of the glory of God, man, fully alive. So I'm excited about that. I don't know, as you're thinking about your celebration of Christmas this year, I just hope it's an invitation to say, you know what? It's pretty wonderful. There are no mere mortals. The people that you're going to celebrate Christmas with, let's do a good job looking around those tables and being like, man, my brother, my sister, my mom, my cousin, that little baby at the family gathering, like, this is a human person made in the image of God. And God has not only created that life, but he's given his life to give that life, to bring that life to its full. And that's something that we get to participate in. If that's what we get to celebrate and we get to aim at 2024 going, we get to be together in this journey to recover a way of being human that gives glory to God by actually being people who think and act and feel in a really harmonized way. I think that's something really beautiful. So, yeah.
I love it. And I mean, just to wrap it up, I think you mentioned like just saying yes in 2024. And I think that with like a mature mindset, I feel like culture has made sensuality into this thing. Like you, like two people, you know, the whole spiel. But like, I think that there's also sensuality in just experiencing life and feeling like the good stuff, in the sense of the feeling you get when you're at the airport and you're about to go travel somewhere, or the feeling you get after you write something really good, or the feeling you get after you hang out with a friend and it just felt good. Like there's like this sensual desire to have more of it. And so I think that's a really cool way to look at it, because like I said, society has really made it into something that's untouchable and only can be brought out in one way. But there's sensualness in life in general, and I think that's something to simmer on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I love it. And it's I mean, you just said it. It's the aim of all these things, sensuality, all of it. The aim of it is to look through it, and it leads us to peer into something beyond. It's transcendent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I eat that beautiful fruit, the hope is when I taste that, my next thought is that was God given. That's a gift. My capacity to taste it, the very thing that I'm tasting, all of that didn't just happen. It's not an accident. That was all gift, right? And it even comes down to sex. And we don't talk about this in this way in the church, but even that, like the highest pleasure that can be experienced by the human person in that way, that points through. And it's a glimpse into joy and this incredible capacity of humans to experience joy. Where'd that come from? That's a gift. That it points somewhere. And if we can recover that way of seeing, I mean, this is why we always talk about art as this way of seeing through and allowing us to look through something to see the good, see what's true, see what's beautiful. I think 2024, we can keep pulling on that thread, and what a good conversation to have. So, all right, I'm seeing our time, and we're like, if we keep talking, it's literally going to turn Christmas Eve on this episode. Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today. It was so much fun. Such great conversation and such great things to just reflect on for your own life and how you can embody, you know, the good life every single day.
There you go.
Well, thank you everyone, and we will see you next time for episode 5.
Boom. Miracles from C.S. Lewis. The central miracle asserted by Christians is the incarnation. They say that God became man. Every other miracle prepares for this, or exhibits this, or results from this. In the Christian story, God descends to reascend. He comes down from the heights of absolute being into time and space, down into humanity, down to the very roots and seabed of the nature he has created. But he goes down to come up again and bring the ruined world up with him. One has the picture of a strong man stooping lower and lower to get himself underneath some great complicated burden. He must stoop in order to lift. He must also disappear under the load before he incredibly straightens his back and marches off with the whole mass swaying on his shoulders. Or one may think of a diver, first reducing himself to nakedness, then glancing in midair, then gone with a splash, vanished, rushing down through green and warm water into black and cold water, down through increasing pressure, into the death-like region of ooze and slime and old decay. Then up again to color and light, his lungs almost bursting, till suddenly he breaks surface again, holding in his hand the dripping, precious thing he went down to recover. He and it are both colored now that they have come up into the light. Down below, where it lay colorless in the dark, he lost his color too. In his descent and reascent, everyone will recognize a familiar pattern, a thing written all over the world. It is the pattern of all vegetable life. It must belittle itself into something hard, small, and deathlike. It must fall into the ground. Thence the new seed, the new life reascends. So it is also in our mortal and emotional life. The first innocence and spontaneous desires have to submit to the death-like process of control or total denial. But from that there is a reascent to fully formed character in which the strength of the original material all operates, but in a new way. Death and rebirth go down to go up. It is a key principle. Through this bottleneck, this belittlement, this high road nearly always lies. The doctrine of the incarnation, if accepted, puts this principle even more emphatically at the center. The pattern is there in nature because it was first there in God. All the instances of it which I have mentioned turn out to be but transpositions of the divine theme into a minor key. I am not now referring simply to the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, the total pattern of which they are only the turning point, is the real death and rebirth. For certainly no seed ever fell from so fair a tree into so dark and cold a soil as would furnish more than a faint analogy to this huge descent and reascension in which God dredged the salt and oozy bottom of creation.